A decision that lasted less than 5 minutes may have saved an entire nation. Not a battle, not a bombing campaign, not a secret weapon. Just a handful of men gathered inside a room in London, arguing over a single question. Should Britain keep fighting, or ask Adolf Hitler for peace? If the answer had gone the other way, the Second World War might have ended before America ever entered it. Nazi Germany could have dominated Europe for generations, and the modern world would look almost unrecognizable today. History often celebrates the great battles and famous speeches. But sometimes, everything changes because someone refuses to say one simple word. Yes. At the end of this story, you'll understand why many historians believe Britain's greatest victory didn't begin in the skies over England or on the beaches of Normandy. It began behind closed doors during one of the darkest weeks in British history. You'll discover why several of Britain's most powerful leaders believed negotiating with Hitler was the only sensible option, why Winston Churchill stood almost alone at the most dangerous moment of his life, and why the decision made in those tense minutes echoed across every battlefield that followed. The ending is even more astonishing when you realize just how close Britain came to choosing the opposite path. Before we continue, imagine yourself in that room. Your army has suffered a devastating defeat. Nearly all of Europe has fallen. Your allies are collapsing one after another. Across the English Channel stands the most powerful military machine the world has ever seen. Do you keep fighting knowing your country could be invaded and destroyed? Or do you negotiate to save millions of lives? Take a moment and decide before you hear what happened, because your answer might surprise you once you know the full story. By May 1940, Europe seemed to be collapsing in fast forward. Only months earlier, many military experts believed another long, exhausting war like World War I was beginning. Instead, Germany unleashed a terrifying new style of warfare. Tanks, aircraft, and infantry moved together with incredible speed, smashing through defensive lines that had taken years to build. Entire countries that expected months of resistance fell within weeks. Poland was crushed. Denmark surrendered almost immediately. Norway struggled but eventually fell. Then came the attack that stunned the world. Germany invaded Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands before driving straight into France. The French army was considered one of the strongest on earth. It possessed huge numbers of soldiers, modern equipment, and the famous Maginot Line, an enormous chain of defenses designed to stop another German invasion. On paper, France looked nearly impossible to conquer. Yet German forces simply went around the strongest defenses, driving through the Ardennes forest, a route many experts believed was too difficult for tanks. It was a gamble that paid off spectacularly. Within days, German armored divisions were racing toward the English Channel, trapping hundreds of thousands of Allied troops. Everything changed astonishingly fast. British commanders could hardly believe the reports arriving from France. Units were disappearing. Communications were failing. Roads became rivers of refugees fleeing advancing German columns. The speed of the German offensive created panic unlike anything Europe had witnessed before. Military plans carefully developed over decades were becoming worthless almost overnight. Then came one of the greatest rescue missions in history. Nearly 340,000 British and Allied soldiers became trapped around the French port of Dunkirk. They faced destruction or capture as German forces closed in from every direction. Britain launched an enormous evacuation involving naval warships, fishing boats, ferries, tugboats, pleasure yachts, and hundreds of civilian vessels. Against impossible odds, most of the soldiers escaped across the English Channel. It looked like a miracle, but miracles can hide disasters. The rescued soldiers arrived home exhausted, many carrying nothing except the uniforms they wore. Heavy tanks, artillery, trucks, ammunition, and enormous quantities of equipment had been abandoned on the beaches. Britain had saved much of its army, but lost much of the army's ability to fight. The nation suddenly faced an uncomfortable truth. If Germany invaded soon, Britain possessed far fewer weapons than anyone wanted to admit. As this military catastrophe unfolded, another crisis exploded inside the British government. Confidence in Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain had collapsed. His policy of appeasing Hitler before the war had failed spectacularly, and many members of parliament believed new leadership was urgently needed. But replacing a prime minister in the middle of a national emergency was dangerous. Britain needed someone capable of inspiring confidence while facing what many believed was certain defeat. The obvious candidate wasn't actually Winston Churchill. Many politicians distrusted him. Throughout his career, Churchill had switched political parties, made controversial decisions, and developed a reputation for being brilliant but unpredictable. Critics described him as reckless. Some believed he was too emotional. Others thought he loved military adventures too much. Even members of his own party questioned whether he possessed the judgment required during Britain's darkest hour. Another respected politician, Lord Halifax, appeared to be the safer choice. Calm, experienced, and highly respected, Halifax enjoyed the confidence of many senior leaders. Ironically, Halifax himself hesitated. As a member of the House of Lords rather than the House of Commons, leading the government during wartime would be politically difficult. That hesitation opened the door for Churchill. On May 10, 1940, as German forces stormed into Western Europe, Winston Churchill became Prime Minister. The timing could hardly have been worse. Within hours of taking office, Churchill inherited perhaps the most desperate military situation any British leader had faced in centuries. Europe was collapsing. France was nearing defeat. Britain's professional army had barely escaped destruction. German bombers could already reach British cities, and invasion seemed increasingly possible. Few leaders in history have begun their first day with worse news. Churchill understood something that many others preferred not to discuss publicly. Britain was frighteningly alone. Poland had fallen. Norway had fallen. Belgium would soon surrender. The Netherlands was collapsing. France, Britain's strongest continental ally, appeared unable to stop the German advance. Across Europe, Hitler looked unstoppable. The numbers painted an intimidating picture. Germany controlled vast industrial resources, enormous armies, experienced commanders, and a military that had won victory after victory in astonishingly short periods. Britain still possessed the world's most powerful navy, but armies win invasions on land, and the German army looked almost unbeatable. Even Britain's air defenses, though improving rapidly, faced an opponent with far greater combat experience. Fear spread quietly. Ordinary citizens prepared for bombing raids. Families dug air raid shelters in gardens. Volunteers joined the Home Guard, many carrying little more than hunting rifles or old equipment left over from previous conflicts. Road signs were removed to confuse invading forces. Beaches were lined with obstacles designed to slow German landings. Every preparation revealed the same terrifying possibility. Britain genuinely expected invasion. Yet inside government circles, another debate had already begun. It wasn't about how to defeat Hitler. Many believed that wasn't possible anymore. Instead, the question became whether Britain should seek peace while it still had enough strength to negotiate favorable terms. To many experienced politicians, that seemed like common sense rather than surrender. After all, Hitler had repeatedly claimed he admired the British Empire. Some believed he simply wanted dominance over mainland Europe while allowing Britain to keep its colonies and independence. If negotiations happened quickly, perhaps Britain could avoid invasion, preserve millions of lives, and prevent years of devastating warfare. It sounded reasonable. It also became one of the most dangerous ideas ever discussed inside the British government. Among those seriously considering negotiations was Lord Halifax, the Foreign Secretary. Halifax wasn't acting out of cowardice. He genuinely feared that continuing the war could destroy Britain completely. If France collapsed and Britain stood alone, what realistic chance did the country have? He believed exploring peace terms through neutral countries such as Italy might reveal whether an acceptable agreement existed. Others quietly agreed. They saw mathematics rather than emotion. Germany possessed overwhelming military momentum. Britain lacked allies on the continent. Supplies were uncertain. The United States remained officially neutral, and there was no guarantee it would ever enter the war. Continuing to fight might simply delay an inevitable defeat while causing unimaginable suffering. From today's perspective, it's easy to dismiss those arguments. But sitting in London during May 1940, surrounded by reports of one military disaster after another, negotiations seemed to many like the responsible option rather than the weak one. Churchill saw something different. He believed that the moment Britain asked Hitler for peace, it would lose more than the war. It would lose its freedom to choose its own future. Even if Germany initially offered generous terms, Churchill doubted Hitler would honor them once Britain had surrendered its position of resistance. He refused to gamble Britain's future on promises made by a dictator. That conviction would soon be tested inside one of the most important meetings ever held in British history, where a discussion lasting only a few minutes would determine whether Britain continued fighting or changed the course of the 20th century forever.